He's been called a criminal, a preacher, a vigilante, and a hero. But the truth, it's messier than any headline could handle. Sam Childers didn't grow up dreaming of saving children. He grew up in the back seat of a car heading nowhere fast, chased by poverty, raised on grit, and hardened by fists. He ran drugs before he could drive, fought grown men before he could shave, and built a criminal empire while most kids were still picking classes. But then, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't cinematic, it was a whisper, a wreck, a child torn in two by war. And from that moment on, Sam didn't just survive. He stepped into something much darker and somehow much holier. He became the machine gun preacher. Armed with scripture in one hand and a rifle in the other, Sam walked straight into Africa's bloodiest war zones, not to negotiate but to rescue. And while the world debated the morality of his methods, children just kept being saved. This isn't a story about perfection, it's a story about promise, and the man crazy enough to keep it, no matter the cost. Some kids are raised on lullabies. Sam Childers was raised on the sound of engines, the crack of fists, and a father who believed that a man's word hit harder than his punch. And he punched hard. Born in North Dakota but never rooted anywhere long enough to call it home. Sam's early life was a blur of highway exits and unfinished friendships. His dad, a no-nonsense Marine and part-time preacher, moved the family wherever the work took him, from missile plants to coal mines.
My dad was part American Indian. My dad thought unemployment was welfare. So we moved all over the U.S. I was born in North Dakota. He was working on the missile plants.
That meant 7 high schools, each one tougher than the last.
So I went to 7 different high schools over the U.S., so we traveled around a lot,
And when you're the new kid every year, you learn quickly. Safety doesn't come from fitting in. It comes from finding the people who fight back. In a world divided between nerds, jocks, and hoods, Sam didn't just lean into the hoods, he sprinted toward them. Not because they were bad, but because they were honest.
But back in my day, you were either a nerd, a jock, or a hood. There was only 3 choices. And the ones that always welcomed everyone was the hoods. And the hoods were the ones, smoking cigarettes, doing drugs, and partying,
The jocks laughed. The hoods lit joints and passed them without judgment. And if you were weak, they didn't mock you. They handed you a smoke and said, "We got your back." By the age of 15, he wasn't just skipping class. He was running the block. Girls, guns, drugs. It wasn't a hobby, it was an enterprise. When most teens were stressing over prom dates, Sam was managing a small crew of prostitutes and carrying a suitcase full of drugs.
I had girls that worked for me when I was 15, 16 years old, prostitutes.
His teachers. Some of them weren't just educators, they were customers, or worse.
I used to do some of my teachers, and people would say, well, how come that never hit the news? Listen, I was the guy that never wanted to tell because I didn't want to stop it,
But for all the chaos, there was something else brewing inside him. A seed. Maybe it came from watching his dad knock out 2 grown men in a diner parking lot. Or maybe it was from his mother, the quiet Christian who kept showing up at her drug-dealing son's apartment with meatloaf and grace.
When I quit school at 15 years old, I moved out of my home. My mom and dad, both born-again, Spirit-filled Christians, but cool parents, okay? And what I mean by that, my mom would come over to my house after I moved out. They knew I was selling drugs and everything. She'd bring in a meatloaf and food for everyone. Everyone's going to chow down. You got the munchies and stuff.
Sam didn't want saving, not then. But somewhere in the shadows of those bloodshot mornings and barroom brawls, the idea began to flicker. Maybe this isn't all there is. Because the truth is, he wasn't just addicted to heroin. He was addicted to adrenaline, control, and proving he was untouchable.
I was a heroin addict, and I shouldn't say heroin addict. I was probably more of a cocaine addict. I never snorted. When I was 13, 14 years old, I would snort, but I started shooting up at 15. There was probably 2 years of my life that I lived as a bad addict.
But even legends get tired. And when the street no longer feared him the way it used to, Sam didn't stop. He just started listening for a different voice. There are places the lost go when the world shuts its doors. Sam found his place in Chrome, Leather, and Outlaw Code. He was just 15 when the biker world cracked open its throttle and pulled him in.
Yeah, I've rode with motorcycle clubs since I was 15 years old.
Not as a tourist, not as a poser, but as a brother in the making. No permit, no permission, just grit, an old soul, and something dangerous brewing beneath his calm exterior. Most people saw motorcycle clubs through headlines and horror stories. Sam saw something different. He saw a community in chaos. He saw honor wrapped in black denim. He saw men who didn't care about your GPA, only your loyalty.
If you're looking to category people, your motorcycle clubs would be known as hoods, and I believe they welcome people, and I believe that they don't look down on you if you're not very bright or you've done something stupid. They accept you who you are. The only thing that a motorcycle club wants is brotherhood. Brotherhood. They want good, honest people.
When he rode, he wasn't a dropout or a screw-up. He was somebody. And it wasn't just bikes that bonded them. It was the code. Unspoken, but known. You don't rat. You don't run. And when your brother's in a fight, you swing first and ask later.
I believe that the people in the biker world, the people in the hoods, those are the people that will invite you in and show you the most love and loyalty.
By his late teens, Sam wasn't just hanging around clubs. He was moving with them. Long rides to nowhere. Whiskey-soaked nights in dim bars. Strip clubs where respect was measured in silence. He knew how to carry weight, both on his back and in the trunk. Drugs, cash, weapons. Business was business. And Sam, he was always good at business.
I was always a businessman, even though I have no education, no high school education. I was always good at business and a hard worker. That's how my dad brought us up. Work hard.
But this life didn't come cheap. Every laugh around the bonfire was balanced by the tension in a silent room when a stranger walked in. Every party had its shadows, and Sam, young as he was, learned quickly that brotherhood didn't mean safety. It meant risk, traded for belonging. Could they protect you? Yes. Could they destroy you? Absolutely. Would anyone hear about it? Not unless they were supposed to. And yet, for all its grit, the biker world gave Sam something school, church, and society never did. Purpose.
In the area where I live in Pennsylvania, the club that I ride with, there is no club brothers in my area. And I'll wear my cut, I'll wear who I am uptown shopping in Walmart, And so I'm by myself. I'm not with a bunch of club brothers, and I'm willing to stand up for the club I ride with,
He was accepted without judgment, trusted without reasons, and feared without ever needing to raise his voice. Still, something gnawed at him beneath the surface. Why did freedom taste like chains? He wasn't wearing a patch yet, but life had already branded him.
I wasn't wearing a cut. I was associating with them. I was like a hang-around,
His hands were rough, his eyes are sharper, and his heart, still numb, still locked behind years of fights, fast money, and fake peace. He thought this was all life had to offer. That loyalty in the form of violence was as good as it gets. But even the loudest engines can't drown out a whisper, and for Sam, that whisper was getting louder. It was supposed to be just another night out, another bar, another fight, another story for the road. But this time, something cracked. Sam was in Apopka, Florida, living fast and loud. He had cash in his pockets, drugs in his veins, and a woman on his arm, one who knew the strip pole better than she knew safety. Every day felt like a highlight reel of chaos, and every night bled into the next. Yet on that particular evening, when fists flew and knives glinted under neon lights, something changed. The bar turned into a war zone. People were stabbed. Guns went off. Blood hit the floor before the jukebox stopped playing. And even the cops wouldn't come inside. They circled the block instead as a helicopter hovered above, waiting for the violence to burn itself out.
I mean, it was bad. People got shot, people got stabbed. The worst bar fight I've ever seen, worse than anything you'd see. You got to remember, what we watch on TV is not true, okay? But this was reality. And even the police would not come into the bar. They blocked off streets around the bar. They had a helicopter hovering over top the bar.
Sam stood in the middle of it all, adrenaline raging, heart pounding. But instead of swinging, he froze. Not from fear, but from clarity. He looked around at the broken glass, the screaming, the bodies bleeding out on sticky tiles, and asked himself 3 questions he'd never dared ask before. What am I really dying for? What legacy would this leave behind? And if I make it out tonight, will anything change?
That night, in that bar room, I said, if I make it out of here, I'm done living this life.
He walked out of that bar without a scratch, but something inside him didn't survive. Because once a man sees how empty the violence really is, it's impossible to unsee it.
I don't have a problem with dying, but I have a problem with what I'm going to die for. I don't want to die because of a jealous husband or jealous boyfriend. I don't want to die because of a drug deal going bad. I don't want to die because of a bar fight. I mean, the road I was living, I was going to die for some stupid reason.
So he went home, dropped his keys on the counter, and told his wife, "We're leaving. Not next month, not someday." Now she cried. Not because she disagreed, but because she had been waiting for those words for years.
So when I got out that night and I went home, made it to my house, I went in the house. I told my wife at the time, she was a stripper. I told her, I said, we're moving. She started crying because she wanted out too. She was waiting to hear those words, we're moving.
And together they left Florida and disappeared into the quiet hills of Central City, Pennsylvania. Sam didn't just leave the state. He left an entire identity behind. No calls to his old crew, no explanations to the clubs, just silence. Some thought he was dead, others figured he flipped. But the truth was simpler. He was tired. He didn't fear dying. He feared dying without meaning. So while others toasted to more wild nights, Sam picked up a paintbrush, started a roofing business, and tried to rebuild from the ground up. But even as the money came clean and the fists stopped flying, something else was stirring, because God wasn't done. And Sam's war, it was only just beginning. Sam didn't go looking for God. He just wanted the noise to stop. Yet peace, as he would learn, doesn't always come in silence. Sometimes it shows up in a church pew you swore you'd never sit in, dragged there by a woman tired of nagging and a mother who prayed like she meant it.
It was actually 2 years later, she was pestering me every week, will you go to church, will you go to church? Like I tell people, you know, in my area of Pennsylvania, we call that nagging. And when we have a woman that nags us every week, we shut them up. We just do what they want to do, they shut up, okay? So I said, okay, I'll go.
At first, he sat in the back, arms folded, eyes rolling. He wasn't there for salvation. He was there to shut everyone up. But while the choir sang and the preacher preached, something else was happening. Not outside, inside. And when the altar call came, he didn't walk forward with fireworks or weeping. He just whispered 4 words that shook the foundation of his life. "Here I am, God." That should have been the end of the story, but it was just the prelude. Within days, a man he'd never met placed a hand on Sam's shoulder and said Sam laughed. Africa? He was a white boy from the hills. And war? He'd had enough of that already, hadn't he? Yet something stuck.
The preacher prophesied over me. He said I was going to Africa, and I'm thinking, I ain't going to Africa. I'm a white guy. Why would I go to Africa? That's stupid, you know. Now I have dual citizen, and my wife is black, you know. But I didn't think I'd ever go to Africa. And then he told me that I was going to be in a war. And I thinking in my mind, I'm not going to get in another war. I'm already married, you know.
While business bloomed, his roofing company was booming, money was flowing, and he was filing taxes on 6 figures. His spirit felt off balance.
So when I first went to the mission field, I was in my early 30s. I wasn't some young kid like you going to the mission field, man. I owned a real estate company. I had 17 houses and 8 stores that I rented out. I had a construction company. My last year before I said I'm going to be a missionary, my last year I filed taxes on $180,000. Well, when I went back to Pennsylvania, like I said, I was always good at business. So I started a roofing company, roofing and painting. So for those 2 years from the time we moved in 1990 to 1992, I was making big money, man. You know, I'd smoke a little weed, you know, and drink a little bit. But then finally, when I walked into the church and said, "Here I am, God," I started making big money. I mean, everything just changed, you know. You can't ever outgive God. So the more good I would try to do, God kept blessing me.
He tried to buy peace, writing checks to missionaries and nonprofits, hoping generosity would buy him out of obedience. But God didn't want his money. He wanted the man.
I was making big money. In 1997, I wrote out a check for $20,000 and gave it to a mission in Africa. And I was literally thinking, God, wouldn't you rather have my money? And he said, no, I want you.
So Sam sold the real estate, the cars, the trailer, even the guns and fishing boat. He packed a bag, grabbed his passport, and flew to a place he couldn't pronounce to see pain he couldn't ignore. On that first trip, he didn't find purpose in a pulpit or a scripture. He found it standing over the mangled body of a child who had stepped on a mine. The waist down was gone, the face unrecognizable. Gender? Age? It didn't matter. It was a child. And something inside Sam shattered, not from weakness, but from love.
So I was walking on the outskirts of the bush, you know, like the woods, and I came across the body of a small child. May have been 9 years old, but I couldn't even tell if it was a boy or a girl. The waist down was gone. They stepped on a mine. And I'll never forget, I stood over that body and I said, God, I'll do whatever it takes to help these people.
Because in that moment, standing in the blood-soaked dirt of a raided village, the biker-turned-builder became something else entirely. Not a missionary, not a preacher, not a savior, a soldier. In someone else's war. Sam didn't come to Africa to start a war. But war had already started, and when no one else stood between the rebels and the children, they got him instead. The first body he saw wasn't a soldier. It was a child. Small frame, missing limbs, stomach ripped open by a mine. And as Sam stood there, silent, armed, shaking, he made a vow. I'll do whatever it takes. That was over 2 decades ago. He's still there.
The work that we're doing in East Africa is not about 2 children. It's about thousands of children that's been saved, and it's still going on.
The ambushes came first, then the warnings, then the hits. They tried to kill him more than 10 times, but bullets didn't scare him. Regret did.
I mean, even being the machine gun preacher, even here in the U.S., like, I live in the clubhouse on the back of my bike shop when I'm here, you know. But you still have to take precautions. You can't even walk around my house outside and me not know it, you know. Because I get death threats a lot, you know.
He disguised his trucks, dressed soldiers in dresses, and drove into villages most aid groups only saw on the news. He wasn't hunting Joseph Kony, but Kony's men were hunting him. And still, he showed up. Because that's what you do when you're not trying to make headlines. You're trying to stop them. And so the outlaw became the operator. The addict became the architect. The biker became the builder. Sam didn't just build orphanages. He built a system, a feeding program that grew from 20 mouths to over 10,000 daily.
I started over 18 years ago, one of my first feeding programs. And that feeding program started with 20 kids. And to this day, it's over 10,000 meals every day.
A bush medical clinic that started with malaria treatment and now serves thousands every month. A well-drilling crew that drops life into thirsty ground, one village at a time. He even built a truck stop, supermarket, and hotel in Uganda, not to retire, but to fund the war. Every business created jobs, every dollar gave life. Every brick became a bullet against poverty.
So we have a American-style truck stop in northern Uganda. 2 restaurants, hotel, supermarket, auto parts or auto place, tire shop. We're very big in the working people there. It works about 130 people.
And when people told him to quit, even his wife after 17 years, he said no.
But 17 years in, she just one day says, let's quit Africa. She wanted me to walk away, put a big sum of money in the bank, which was all legal, nothing illegal about it. Rock our grandbabies on the porch and, you know, take care of the little church we had from the movie. And she just wanted me to walk away and quit. I couldn't do it.
He's been ambushed, arrested, nearly assassinated.
But anyways, I was arrested 5 times, sat in jail every time. I was in probably a total 6 to 8 weeks total in jail, but I was never convicted of a crime. I mean, God really blessed me, you know.
The U.S. government once raided his shop. Enemies posted bounties, friends turned cold, but Sam never stopped. He doesn't wear medals, he wears scars. And even now in his 60s, he still suits up, still loads his sidearm, and still walks into the fire.
Now I'm getting old, you know, I'm 62 years old. Still suiting up, still putting on a bulletproof vest, still going into the wars rescuing children.
Not for glory, not for revenge, but because he made a promise. And when the machine gun preacher makes a promise, he keeps it, even if it kills him.